For 11 long years, I believed every word my husband said, believed in the image of a devoted brother sending money each month to his sick sister. I lived in that sweet trust until the day the velvet curtain of deceit was torn away. The moment I came face to face with that sister was the moment my world collapsed. This is my true story, a scar that time cannot erase, a betrayal that crushed my very soul. If you are listening from anywhere in the world, please leave a comment and subscribe, because some truths need to be spread, even if they might shake your beliefs. Some stories, no matter how painful, must be told. Well, let's go back to the year 1965. I was only 16 years old when I met Walter. He was a handsome, hard-working young man and seemed to have a promising future as a truck driver. Back then, being a truck driver was a respected job, you know. You made good money. And I, a simple girl from a blue-collar suburb of Atlanta, the daughter of sharecroppers who came from the countryside in search of a better life, saw in him the chance to build a family. We got married after 6 months of dating. My mother said it was too fast, that I barely knew the young man. But that's how things were in those days. You fell in love and got married right away. It wasn't like today where couples live together to test if it works out. Back then, we got married in a church with a veil and gown and asked for God's blessing for the marriage to last forever. Our beginning was difficult, as it was for most young couples. We lived in a small studio apartment in the back of his aunt's house. Walter traveled a lot, working the Atlanta to Savannah and Miami route. Sometimes he'd be gone for 3-4 days. I understood. It was his job. He always said, "Margaret, it's for you and the family we're going to build that I drive all over this country." Soon, our first child came, Christian. 2 years later, Scarlett was born, and 3 years after that, Logan. 3 children to raise, and there I was, juggling diapers, baby bottles, and housework while Walter continued on the road. It was around the 2nd year of our marriage that he told me about his sister, Catherine. According to Walter, she lived in Savannah and had health problems. He never specified exactly what the illness was, only saying that it was serious and that she needed constant help. Every month, without fail, he set aside a good portion of his salary to send to her. "Margaret, she's my only sister. Our parents are gone. We only have each other. I can't abandon her. All 9. He would tell me this with those brown eyes that could convince me of anything. And I, foolish as I was, believed him. I even thought that brotherly love, that concern, was beautiful. Many times, when money was tight at home, when we were short on cash for school supplies for the kids, or when Christian's sneakers had holes in them, I would look at the envelope Walter set aside for Catherine and feel a pang in my heart. But I never, ever questioned it. It was his family. I respected that. You see, my dears, back in those days, a husband's word was like the law in the house. A good wife simply didn't question it, especially when it came to his own family. I thought my trust was a virtue, but it turned out to be the very veil that blinded me from the truth. The years went by. Our life remained simple but stable. We lived in a small townhouse in the suburbs. The children attended public school. I took in laundry to help with expenses, but we weren't in need. Walter earned a reasonably good living as a truck driver, even though a considerable part of his salary went to this Catherine. Something I found strange, but didn't question much, was the fact that we had never visited this sister-in-law. During the holidays, on birthdays, there was never an invitation to meet her. When I suggested it, Walter always dodged the subject. He'd say she was very private, that she didn't like visitors, that the environment in her house needed to be controlled because of her illness. "We'll go one day, Margaret, but now is not a good time," he would always reply. And so I waited. But year after year, the right time never came. It wasn't a sharp pain, but a dull, constant ache of confusion. There were small things that didn't add up. Phone calls he would take in another room, a certain distance in his eyes when he returned from his Miami trips, a kind of weariness that seemed deeper than just fatigue from the road. I would push these thoughts away, telling myself I was being foolish. He was a good provider. He was gentle with the children. A woman shouldn't ask for more. But the questions remained, unspoken, living in the quiet corners of my heart. And I, raised to be a good wife, not to question my husband's decisions, accepted it. Today I wonder how I could have been so blind, so naive. But in those days, that's how it was. The woman accepted, kept quiet, trusted. The routine was always the same. Walter would leave for his trips, come home for a few days, and then leave again. When he said he was going to Miami, the trips lasted longer, usually a whole week. "It's farther, Margaret, and the cargo to Miami always brings in more money," he explained. And it made sense to me. It was in 1978, when we had been married for 13 years, that things started to change. Our children were growing up. Christian was 12, Scarlett was 10, and Logan was 7. I had gotten a job as a seamstress's assistant in a small garment shop near our house. I didn't earn much, but it helped with the expenses, and I liked the work. I always had a knack for sewing. I learned from my mother since I was little. That March of 1978, I remember it like it was yesterday. I was packing Walter's things for another trip to Miami. As I always did, I washed and ironed his shirts, separated his socks, checked if any buttons were missing from his uniform. It was a routine I had followed faithfully for years. I picked up his jacket, that navy blue one he always wore on his trips, to check if it needed any mending. That's when I felt something in the inside pocket. I put my hand in and pulled out a handmade birthday card with drawings of colorful polka dots. I opened the card and read, "Happy birthday, my love. May God give you many years of life and health to continue being the wonderful father and husband you are. With all our love, Catherine and Haley." My heart pounded. I reread those words several times, trying to find some explanation. Father, husband, who was Haley? Why was his supposedly sick sister calling him my love and husband? Walter's birthday had been in February, a month earlier. I had made a simple cake, bought him a small gift, a new wallet since his was very worn out. He barely ate the cake, said he was tired from the trip, and thanked me for the gift without much enthusiasm. Now I understood why his reaction was so cold. He had probably already celebrated with them, whoever they were. I tucked the card into my apron with trembling hands. I didn't confront Walter at that moment. You know, a simple card can be explained away, can't it? Margaret's gut was telling her this was just the tip of the iceberg, and if she was going to tear her world apart, she needed proof that couldn't be denied. Let's see what she uncovers next. Oh, a part of me wanted to scream, to throw that card in his face right then and there. But another part, a quieter, colder part, told me it wasn't enough. He could lie his way out of a card, couldn't he? I knew in my gut that if I was going to tear my world apart, I needed to be holding something more solid than a piece of paper. Something inside me told me I needed more proof, needed to understand what was happening better before making any accusations. Walter left for another trip to Miami the next day, not suspecting that I had found the card. He kissed me on the forehead, as he always did, hugged the children, and promised to bring back a chocolate bar for each of them. The scene was so familiar, so normal, but now there was a shadow over it, a doubt that was growing inside me. In the days that followed, I paid attention to every detail, any clue that could help me understand what was going on. I didn't tell anyone, not even my best friend, Diane, who lived next door. It was a pain, a suspicion that I kept only to myself. It was on Thursday of that week that I received a phone call that would change everything. The phone rang around 3 inches the afternoon. Back then, a telephone was a rare thing in homes. We had managed to get one installed just a few months earlier, and it was a source of pride in the neighborhood. "Hello? Good afternoon. This is Southern Star Trucking. Could I speak with Mr. Walter?" "He's not here. He's on a trip. I'm his wife, Margaret." "Oh, Mrs. Margaret, we need to speak with him urgently. We have a load for Miami that needs to go out today. The driver who was supposed to take it had a problem, and we thought of Walter." "But he's already in Miami," I said, confused. "He left on Monday morning. He should be on his way back by now." There was a silence on the other end of the line. "In Miami? Impossible, ma'am. The load he was supposed to take was only ready last night. He didn't leave for Miami this week." I felt as if the floor had opened up beneath my feet. My voice trembled as I replied, "There must be some mistake. My husband left for Miami on Monday. He's worked for you for over 15 years. "Ma'am, we know. That's precisely why we're calling him. but he didn't pick up any load for Miami this week. Perhaps you were mistaken. I hung up the phone with a trembling hand. No, I hadn't been mistaken. Mistaken? Oh no, my dears. A woman doesn't get mistaken about a lie her husband has told her over and over for 13 years. In that very moment, the card in my apron and the words from that man on the phone clicked together like a key finding its lock. And I was terrified of the dark room I was about to walk into. Walter had told me clearly that he was going to Miami. He kissed me on the forehead, hugged the children, and left with his travel bag. Where had he gone? Then, the doubt grew inside me like a tumor. That same week, while looking for the kids' documents for school re-enrollment, I opened the drawer where Walter kept his papers. At the back of the drawer, hidden under several documents, I found a checkbook from a different bank than ours, and an envelope with the name Catherine and an address in Savannah. I jotted down the address on a small piece of paper and kept it in my picture frame, behind our wedding photo. The irony did not escape me. To hide the proof of my husband's possible betrayal next to the memory of the day we swore fidelity to each other before God, the following days were filled with anguish. I needed to know the truth, but I was afraid of what I might discover. What if Walter had another family? What if that Haley mentioned in the card was his daughter? How would I face this reality with 3 children to raise and very little professional experience? But I've always been a woman of courage, even when I seemed fragile on the outside. I decided I would go to Savannah, to that address, to find out who Catherine really was and what she meant in my husband's life. I waited until Walter's next trip to Miami, which happened 2 weeks later. On Friday, as soon as he left, I took the children to my friend Diane's house. I need to take care of some business in Savannah, I told her, without going into detail. I'll be back tomorrow night. Could you watch the kids? Diane, always helpful, agreed without asking many questions. She must have noticed something strange in my behavior over the past few days, but respected my silence. I took my savings, money I kept hidden in a tin of Hershey's cocoa powder at the back of the kitchen cabinet. It wasn't much, but it would cover a round-trip bus ticket to Savannah and leave some for an emergency. I put the birthday card in my purse. It was the only concrete proof I had. I wore my best dress, a light blue one with small flowers that I had sewn myself. I combed my hair neatly, put on some discreet lipstick. I wanted to look presentable to face whatever I would find at that address in Savannah. I took the bus from the Greyhound terminal early in the morning. The trip to Savannah took about 4 hours, but to me, it felt like an eternity. My heart was beating so fast I thought the other passengers could hear it. You can just feel the anxiety on that long bus ride, can't you? Every mile is taking her closer to a truth that could either shatter her world or finally set her free. She's praying for an innocent explanation, but what she finds at the end of this ride is more shocking than any of us could ever imagine. On that long ride, my mind raced with 1,000 different stories. Maybe Catherine was just a friend, and Haley was her daughter. Maybe there was a simple, innocent explanation for everything. Oh, how I prayed for an innocent explanation. But deep down, a woman always knows, doesn't she? I was just praying to be wrong. What would I find? Was I about to discover that my entire married life had been a lie? Or would there be a reasonable explanation for everything, and I would return home relieved, laughing at my fertile imagination? When I got off the bus in Savannah, I took another city bus, which would take me to the neighborhood indicated on the address. It was a beautiful neighborhood, clearly more affluent than mine. The houses were larger, the lawns well kept, the streets cleaner. I finally arrived at the address. It was a corner house, painted a light yellow, with a beautiful garden in the front, and a small shop in the garage. A discreet sign announced, Catherine's Atelier, Custom Clothing. I took a deep breath and opened the gate. The sound of the doorbell made my heart leap. I was about to discover the truth that would change my life forever. I entered the small atelier, trying to control the trembling in my hands. The shop was beautiful, well organized, with several pieces of clothing displayed on racks and mannequins. Colorful fabrics were arranged on shelves, much more luxurious than the scraps I sewed with at home. It was a welcoming, feminine atmosphere that, in another situation, I would have admired, but at that moment, every detail only increased my anguish. a young girl appeared from the back of the shop. She must have been about 14, with long brown hair tied in a braid and eyes. My God, those eyes were identical to my Christian's, identical to Walter's. "Good morning, ma'am. Can I help you?" she asked with a friendly smile. I stood paralyzed for a few seconds, observing every detail of that young face. The shape of her nose, her slightly square chin, even the way she smiled, with her head tilted slightly to the side. Everything reminded me of Walter. "I'm looking for Catherine," I managed to say, my voice barely audible. "My mom went out to buy supplies, but my dad is home. Do you want to talk to him?" My dad. Those two simple words confirmed what my heart already knew. Haley. She was the girl from the birthday card, my husband's daughter with another woman. "Yes, please," I replied automatically, although I was not prepared for what was to come. "Dad, there's a customer here looking for you," she called towards the back of the house. The seconds that followed seemed like an eternity. I heard footsteps approaching, and then there, standing in the doorway that separated the shop from the residence, was Walter, my husband, the man who, at this very moment, was supposed to be driving a truck on his way to Miami. Our eyes met, and I saw his face lose all its color. His eyes widened in pure terror. For a moment, it seemed like he had seen a ghost. And maybe, in a way, that's what I was, the ghost of the life he had built with lies, finally coming to collect his debts. "Margaret," he murmured, so quietly I almost didn't hear him. The girl looked confusedly from one to the other. "Do you know each other?" Before any of us could answer, a woman entered through the front door carrying shopping bags. She was a beautiful woman, about my age, with well-styled hair, red lipstick, wearing an elegant dress that certainly cost more than all my clothes combined. "I'm back, honey. I found that fabric Mrs. Anderson wanted for the dress." She stopped when she saw me. "Sorry, I didn't know we had a customer." "Catherine," Walter said, his voice choked. "This is Margaret." She looked at me without understanding at first. Then, slowly, her expression changed. First confusion, then surprise, and finally, the same look of horror I saw on Walter's face. "Margaret, you're—" She didn't complete the sentence, but she didn't have to. She knew who I was. I took the card out of my purse with trembling hands and held it up. I found this in his jacket. Catherine dropped the bags on the floor. Haley looked at all of us, confused, trying to understand what was happening. "Mom, Dad, who is she?" "Haley, dear, go to your room," Catherine pleaded, but the girl didn't move. "No, she has the right to know," I said, surprised by the firmness in my own voice. After all, she's also a victim in this story. I turned to the young girl, whose eyes were now filled with fear and confusion. "My name is Margaret. I've been married to your father for 13 years. We have 3 children together." The girl's face contorted in shock. She looked at her father, then at her mother, searching for some denial, some sign that what I was saying was a lie. But their silence confirmed everything. "It's a lie, isn't it, Dad?" she begged, tears starting to stream down her face. "Tell me it's a lie." Walter seemed to have aged 10 years in those few minutes. He ran a hand over his face, a gesture I knew so well that he always made when he was cornered. "Haley, I can explain." "Explain what?" Catherine interrupted, her voice trembling with rage. "That you have another family? That everything you've told me for all these years was a lie?" I sat down in a nearby chair. My legs could no longer support me. The shop that had seemed so cozy just minutes before now suffocated me. I looked around and noticed the photographs on the wall. Walter embracing Catherine and Haley, smiling on outings, at birthdays, family moments that were stolen from me and my children. "How long?" I asked, looking directly at Walter. "I met Catherine in 1963, Margaret. She got pregnant in 1964. I panicked. I didn't know what to do. Then I met you the next year, in 1965. I should have told you the truth then, but I was a coward. I thought I could just handle both." "So you decided to marry me and keep both families?" My voice came out louder than I intended. "For 13 years, Walter. 13 years of lies." Catherine approached me, her eyes now filled with tears. "He told me he was a widower when Haley was born, that he couldn't officially marry me because of his first wife's pension. I believed him, Margaret. All these years. Haley, leaning against the wall, was sobbing quietly. My heart ached for her. That innocent girl born in the midst of so many lies. And the money? I asked, turning back to Walter. The money you said you sent to your sick sister every month? He didn't answer, but he didn't need to. It was obvious. The money that could have given my children a better life, that could have paid for classes, new clothes, dental treatment for Scarlett, was being used to support this other family, this beautiful house, this shop. Do you have children? Catherine asked suddenly, drying her tears with the back of her hand, smudging her red lipstick. 3, I replied. Christian, who is 12, Scarlett, 10, and Logan, 7. And I hesitated for a moment, my hand instinctively going to my stomach. I just found out I'm expecting the 4th. Walter's head shot up when he heard that, the shock evident on his face. He didn't know. I had only confirmed it myself the week before, but with this whole situation, I hadn't found the right moment to tell him. What an irony of fate. Pregnant? He murmured, his face as pale as paper. Yes, Walter, we're going to have another child you'll abandon half the time to live your other life. Catherine sat down too, looking as shattered as I felt. How could you, Walter? How could you do this to us? To Haley? To her children? She pointed at me, her voice choked with sobs. We were 2 families waiting for you, believing in you, loving you. Walter looked like a cornered animal. He looked from one to the other, searching for words that wouldn't come. Finally, he said the only thing he probably thought could save him. I love you both. I love both families. Please, try to understand. I didn't want to hurt anyone. The anger rose inside me like a wave. Didn't want to hurt anyone? And what are you doing now, Walter? What have you done for all these years? Every time you left home saying you were going to work to give us a better life, you were coming here. Every time you said you were in Miami, you were here with them. Every dime that could have gone to our children's education, to improve our house, to give them what we never had, you spent here. I looked around the house, much more comfortable than the cramped townhouse where I was raising my children. Look at this place, Walter. Look at the difference. While I was taking in laundry to supplement our income, you were setting up this shop for her. Catherine seemed to realize something for the first time. You said you took in laundry? Walter told me you were a teacher, that you had a good salary, that you didn't need financial help. I laughed bitterly. A teacher? I barely finished elementary school, Catherine. I work as a seamstress's assistant in a garment shop and take in laundry in my spare time. We live in a small townhouse on the outskirts of Atlanta. Our children have never had an expensive toy, never been on a vacation. Turning to Walter, I continued. That's why you always resisted when I suggested we start a savings account for the children's education. That's why you always changed the subject when I talked about renovating the house. The money already had a destination, didn't it? Haley, who had been quiet for a while, suddenly spoke, her voice broken by sobs. I have siblings? I have siblings and I never knew. The question, so innocent and yet so laden with pain, broke something inside me. I approached her slowly, as one approaches a frightened animal. Yes, Haley, you have 3 siblings. Christian looks a lot like you. He has the same eyes. Scarlett is quiet like you seem to be. And Logan is a handful, but he has a huge heart. They don't know about you, just like you didn't know about them. Tears streamed freely down the girl's face. And now? What's going to happen now? It was the question that had been echoing in my mind since the moment I found the card. What would happen now? How would I go on with my life knowing that everything I believed was a lie? Walter, perhaps sensing he was losing control of the situation, tried to approach me. Margaret, let's talk. Let's work this out. We don't have to make any rash decisions. I took a step back. Don't touch me. I don't want to hear any more lies. Catherine, who had been silent, suddenly stood up. You slept in my house last night. You said you'd be here until Sunday, that you'd only go back to Atlanta on Monday, that you were taking Haley to the movies tomorrow. She turned to me, a new understanding in her eyes. When he was with you, he said he was traveling to Miami, right? And when he was with me, he told you he was working. I nodded, feeling a strange connection with this woman who, until minutes ago, was just a name, a supposedly sick sister. He told you I was his? Sister? She asked, the word catching in her throat as if it were poison. Yes, I whispered, the absurdity of it all crashing down on me. His sick sister who needed constant financial help. Catherine let out a hollow, bitter laugh that held no joy. And to me, she said, her eyes locking with mine, he had a struggling brother in the countryside, a brother with a sick son who needed money for treatments. We stared at each other, and in that moment, the world fell away. We weren't rivals. We were two sides of the same counterfeit coin he had been spending for years. The details were different, but the architecture of the lie was identical. In her eyes, I saw my own pain reflected back at me. We were two women, from two different cities, who had spent years waiting for the same man to come home. Walter started speaking again, trying to explain, trying to justify the unjustifiable, but his words were hollow, empty of meaning. He spoke of love, of not wanting to hurt anyone, of how things had gotten out of his control. As he spoke, a decision formed within me. I didn't know what my life would be like from now on, how I would raise 4 children alone, how I would face society as a separated woman in the 70 seconds. But I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could not continue to be married to a man who had lived a lie for so long. Walter? I interrupted his stream of excuses. I don't want to hear any more. I'm taking the bus back to Atlanta now. When you get home, I want you to pack your things and leave. I don't want you near me or my children. Margaret, please, let's talk. There's nothing to talk about. You destroyed our family. You lied to me, to our children, to them. I pointed to Catherine and Haley. There's no going back. I turned to leave, but before I did, I looked one last time at Catherine and Haley. I'm sorry you had to go through this. You don't deserve it. I walked out of the shop into the sunny Savannah street, feeling strangely light despite the pain that was tearing through my chest. I know it's a strange thing to say, feeling light when your heart is breaking. But for years, I'd been carrying the weight of unspoken questions and tiny doubts. The truth, as horrible as it was, had lifted that weight. I was no longer a wife who was wondering. I was a woman who knew. And in that knowing, even in the pain, there was a kind of freedom. The truth, as painful as it was liberating. On the bus back to Atlanta, as tears rolled silently down my face, I began to plan my next steps. How would I tell my children? How would I survive financially? How would I rebuild my life from the broken pieces Walter had left behind? I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that day in Savannah had been the end of one life and the beginning of another. A life without lies, without betrayal. A life that, although uncertain, would be authentically mine. Going home that day was one of the hardest things I've ever done in my life. As the bus traveled along the interstate from Savannah to Atlanta, I stared out the window without really seeing the landscape. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts and emotions. How would I tell the children? What would I say to the neighbors? How would we survive financially? When I got home, it was already dark. I picked up my children from Diane's house, who immediately noticed that something was wrong. My swollen eyes and the devastated look on my face must have given me away. "Did something happen, Margaret?" she asked quietly while the children played in the living room. "We'll talk later," was all I could manage to say. I took the children home and tried to act normally, but Christian, always so observant, noticed I wasn't well. "Mom, are you sick?" he asked, his eyes, so much like Haley's I now knew, full of concern. "No, honey, just a little tired from the trip," I replied, forcing a smile. I put the children to bed early that night, telling them a story I could barely concentrate on remembering. When I finally closed their bedroom door, I collapsed on the living room sofa and cried as I had never cried before. I cried for myself, for my children, even for Catherine and Haley, all victims of Walter's web of lies. And just like that, the source of the lies is gone, leaving only the wreckage behind. This is the moment the anger subsides and the cold, hard reality hits. How do you even begin to pick up the pieces when you're left with nothing but children to feed and a future that's completely unknown? Margaret is at her lowest point. But what happens next shows the true meaning of resilience. The silence of the house that night was a living thing, heavy and suffocating. Every creak of the floorboards sounded like a footstep I both longed for and dreaded. Terror was a cold blanket I couldn't shake off. I looked at my hands, the hands that had cooked his meals and mended his clothes, and they seemed foreign to me. Who was I without him? I was just a woman with 3 children, another on the way, and a skill for sewing that seemed pitifully small against the mountain of debt and uncertainty that stood before me. For a moment, just a fleeting moment in the dark, I felt completely and utterly broken. On Sunday, Walter was supposed to return from his trip to Miami. I spent the whole day mentally rehearsing what I would say to him, how I would demand that he leave the house. But he didn't come that Sunday, nor on Monday. On Tuesday, when the children were insistently asking about their father, I received a call from the trucking company. Walter had quit. He gave no explanation, just left a letter of resignation, and never showed up again. That's when I understood that he wasn't coming back, that he wouldn't have the courage to face what he had done. He would abandon me and the children, just as he had probably abandoned Catherine and Haley. The days that followed were of pure desperation. The money we had saved was little. It would barely cover a month's expenses. My salary as a seamstress's assistant wouldn't be enough to support the house, and 4 children, 3 already born and 1 on the way. It was at that moment that sewing, the skill I learned from my mother as a little girl, became my lifeline. I started taking on small repair and alteration jobs for the neighborhood. I put up flyers in local grocery stores. I offered my services at the school exit when I went to pick up the children. At first, it was so little it barely made a difference in the budget, but gradually my clientele grew. People started coming to me not just for repairs, but to have new clothes made, curtains, tablecloths. My work was meticulous, and my prices were fair. Soon, the living room of our small house was transformed into a makeshift atelier, with scraps of fabric, threads, and an old second-hand sewing machine I had bought. Meanwhile, my belly grew, as did the neighborhood's curiosity. In the 70 seconds, a single, pregnant woman, raising 3 children, was the target of many comments and disapproving looks. I made up a story that Walter had found a better job out of state and that we would soon be moving to join him. It was easier than explaining the truth, than exposing my children to the shame of having a father who lived a double life. I remember clearly the day I received an unexpected phone call. It was Catherine. "Margaret, this is Catherine from Savannah." My heart skipped a beat. What did she want? Did she have news of Walter? Did Walter come back there? She asked, her voice tense. "No," I replied. "He didn't come back. He quit his job at the trucking company and disappeared." There was a silence on the other end of the line, then a sigh. "Here too, vanished without a trace. He just left a letter asking for forgiveness, saying he didn't deserve either of us." I don't know how to explain what I felt at that moment. Anger, of course, for him abandoning his children, but also a strange relief that I wouldn't have to face him, that I wouldn't have to hear any more of his lies. "How are you?" Catherine asked, surprising me with the genuine concern in her voice. "Surviving," I answered honestly. "And you? And Haley?" "The same. The shop is supporting us, at least." Another silence. Then she continued, "Margaret, if you find out where he is, let me know. Not for me, but for Haley. She needs answers." "Of course," I promised. "And if you hear anything, let me know too. My children deserve to know as well." We hung up with a strange sense of camaraderie. We were 2 women abandoned by the same man, 2 mothers trying to protect their children from the pain of rejection. In August 1978, my youngest daughter, Caroline, was born. The birth was difficult, complicated by the stress and worries of the past few months, but when I held that little one in my arms, a new sense of determination was born in me. I would raise these 4 children alone, with dignity, and I would do everything to ensure they never lacked the essentials. The months that followed were filled with hard work and little rest. I sewed during the day while Caroline slept, and at night after the children went to bed. The older ones helped as they could. Christian made small deliveries of finished clothes. Scarlett took care of the baby while I worked. Logan helped with household chores. In 1979, I filed for divorce. I didn't know where Walter was, but his abandonment made the process easier under the no-fault divorce laws that had recently become more common. It was painful to have to explain everything to the lawyer, to see the story recorded in official documents, but I needed that legal freedom. I needed that piece of paper that said I was free, that I could finally rebuild my life. The neighborhood, of course, talked. Back then, being a divorced woman carried a stigma. There were looks of pity, whispers when I walked by. Some friends drifted away, as if divorce were contagious. But others, like Diane, remained by my side, offering support and friendship when I needed it most. It was around this time that I received an offer that would change my life. Mrs. Genevieve, a loyal client for whom I did various sewing jobs, owned a small fabric store in the center of the neighborhood. One day, she came to my house with a proposal. "Margaret, I'm thinking of expanding my store. I want to open a dressmaking section, but I need someone who understands the business, who has good taste and skilled hands. I thought of you." The offer was tempting. A fixed salary, better than the factory where I worked as an assistant, and a commission on the pieces sold. I accepted immediately, seeing it as an opportunity to improve my children's lives. I worked hard at Mrs. Genevieve's store during the day and continued with my extra jobs at night. Gradually, I started creating my own pieces, simple but elegant designs that pleased the customers. Mrs. Genevieve, noticing my talent, began to give me more creative freedom. In 1980, a year after starting at the store, I received another unexpected call from Catherine. "Margaret, I need your help," she said, her voice choked with emotion. She told me her shop was doing poorly, that debts were piling up, that she didn't know how to go on. Walter had never been heard from again, and she and Haley were about to lose their house. I can't explain what motivated me. Maybe it was female solidarity. Maybe the memory of Haley's frightened eyes that day in Savannah. Maybe the thought that it could have been me in her place. Without much thought, I heard myself saying, "Come to Atlanta. I know someone who needs a fabric saleswoman." R.S. Ding. 2 weeks later, Catherine and Haley arrived in Atlanta with a few suitcases and many broken dreams. I rented a room for them at Diane's house, who, after hearing the whole story, agreed to help. I introduced Catherine to Mrs. Genevieve, who, impressed by her knowledge of fabrics and her way with customers, hired her immediately. Haley, then 15, enrolled in the same school as my children, though in different grades due to her age. It was strange at first, this unlikely arrangement. My children, whom I finally had to tell the truth about their father, were confused, hurt, especially Christian, who at 13 already understood perfectly what his father had done. "Why are you helping them, Mom?" he asked me one day, his voice thick with resentment. "He abandoned us for them." "No, son," I replied, holding his hands in mine. "Your father abandoned us because of himself, because of his own wrong choices. Catherine and Haley are victims just as much as we are. And in this world, women need to help each other." Scarlett was quieter, her hurt showing in her withdrawal, while Logan, ever the protector, was simply angry that anyone had made his mother cry. It took time, but my constant reassurance that our family was defined by our love for each other, not by our father's absence, slowly began to heal their wounds. Gradually, a strange friendship began to form between our families. Catherine, who initially seemed uncomfortable with my generosity, began to reciprocate in any way she could. She brought sweets for the children, helped Scarlett with her math homework, a subject she was good at. She offered to watch Caroline when I had to work late. Haley, after some initial rejection, started to get closer to my children, especially Christian. The two discovered that besides their looks, they shared a love for books and stories. It was painful and, at the same time, comforting to see them together, discovering this late-found brotherhood. In 1981, Mrs. Genevieve decided to retire and offered the store for sale. The price was beyond my means, but she, who had become almost a second mother to me, proposed a deal. I could pay in monthly installments while managing the business. That's when I had a bold idea. I called Catherine for a talk. "What if we became partners?" I proposed. Now this is a turning point you don't see coming. In an act of incredible grace, Margaret is reaching out to the one person she had every reason to hate, choosing to build something new from the wreckage, together. Will Catherine accept? This single decision will define the rest of both of their lives. Some people might call me a fool for trusting the other woman, but I wasn't seeing the other woman anymore. I saw a mother, just like me, who had been abandoned and was scared. Walter's lies were meant to keep us apart, to keep us weak. I figured the most powerful thing we could do was take the truth that he used to break us and use it to build something together. You understand sales and fabrics. I understand dressmaking. Together, we can turn this store into something bigger. She looked at me, her eyes wide with a mix of disbelief and hope. You would trust me like that, Margaret? After everything? I reached across the table and placed my hand over hers. Her skin was worn, just like mine. Catherine, I said softly but firmly, it wasn't you who broke my trust. It was him. He built his life on a foundation of lies that kept us apart. What if we build ours on the one truth that brought us together? That we are strong, we are capable, and we are survivors. A single tear rolled down her cheek, but this time, it was not a tear of sorrow. It was a tear of release. New beginnings, she whispered, and in that moment, our business had its name and its soul. Catherine handled sales and administration. I handled creation and production. In the beginning, it was just the two of us, working from dawn till dusk, but soon the business began to grow, and we were able to hire help. The years passed, and the shop prospered. We moved to a larger space, hired more seamstresses, expanded our product line, and even started supplying uniforms to some local companies, including, ironically, the same trucking company where Walter had worked. When my Logan brought that contract home, I just sat and stared at it for the longest time. Southern Star Trucking. The name that had been the final nail in the coffin of my marriage. And now they were our clients. It wasn't about revenge, my dears. It was closure. It was proof that the life I had built from the ashes was stronger than the one that had burned down. The children grew up. Christian, always studious, got a scholarship to college and graduated in engineering. Scarlett followed in my footsteps and became interested in fashion, becoming a talented designer who brought new ideas to the business. Logan, with his outgoing personality, naturally took over the sales department when Catherine started to slow down due to her age. And Caroline, my youngest, born in the midst of so much turmoil, grew up to be a strong and determined young woman, studying law and defending causes for women like her mother. Haley, Catherine's daughter, graduated in business administration and brought a new level of professionalism to the business. It was she who suggested we expand into other areas, who organized our financial system, who guided us through the complicated tax and labor laws. Life wasn't easy, but it was honest and dignified. We never heard from Walter again. Years later, news came that he had died in a road accident somewhere in the Midwest. I felt a strange mix of emotions. Sadness for the father of my children, anger at the man who abandoned us, and finally, a kind of peace at having closure. When I look back at that scared young woman who discovered her husband's betrayal in 1978, I barely recognize the woman I've become. The road was hard, full of obstacles, but every challenge made me stronger. Every difficulty taught me something new. The birthday card I found in Walter's jacket pocket could have destroyed my life, but it ended up being the beginning of a journey of self-discovery and overcoming. The pain of betrayal transformed into the strength to rebuild not only my life but the lives of everyone around me. And most surprisingly of all, the woman I once feared most, the one who represented Walter's betrayal, became my ally, my partner, my friend. Catherine and I, two women deceived by the same man, found in each other the strength to move forward, proving that sometimes the greatest blessings come disguised as tragedies. The 80 seconds brought many changes to the United States and to my life. While the country was experiencing the end of the Cold War era and dreaming of a new prosperity, I was building my own path to liberation. Our store, New Beginnings Apparel, grew every year, becoming a landmark in the neighborhood. What started as a small business of two desperate women transformed into a solid company that employed over 15 seamstresses and 3 saleswomen. It wasn't easy. In the beginning, many suppliers didn't take 2 divorced women trying to run a business seriously. I remember one fabric representative who insisted on speaking only with the owner when he came to the store. Catherine, always more diplomatic than me, would smile and say, "You're speaking to her. In fact, to both owners." In 1984, we expanded to a space 3 times larger on the main avenue of the neighborhood. We took out a bank loan, another immense challenge for women at that time. The manager only approved it after Christian, then 18, signed as a guarantor, even though all the assets were ours. That was the world we lived in, where a man's signature was worth more than the entire success history of a business run by women. But we didn't let those barriers stop us. The new store had a large display window where we showcased our best creations. In the back, we set up a larger workshop with industrial machines that allowed us to take on bigger orders. Soon we were supplying uniforms for schools, companies, and even some local hospitals. Scarlett, my daughter, then 16, proved to be a natural-born designer. She started by sketching simple models for our younger clients, and soon her creations were among the most sought after in the store. Seeing her talent flourish was one of the greatest joys of those years. It was as if all the sacrifice, all the sleepless nights, all the hard work had been worth it just to see my children finding their own paths. Christian started college for engineering in 1984 on a full scholarship for his exceptional academic performance. I remember his graduation day in 1989 as if it were yesterday. Sitting in the audience between Catherine and my other children, I couldn't hold back the tears when I saw him receiving his diploma, so elegant in a suit borrowed from a cousin. At that moment, I thought of Walter, of how he had lost the privilege of seeing his son become such an admirable man. Logan, always the most extroverted of my children, found his place in sales. Since he was a teenager, he helped at the store on Saturdays, charming the customers with his natural charisma. When he turned 18 inches, 1,989, he was already our top salesman, with a special talent for negotiating with suppliers and winning new clients. And Caroline, my youngest, born in the midst of that 1,978 storm, grew up as a strong and determined girl. From a young age, she showed a sharp intelligence and a sense of justice that often surprised me. When a teacher suggested she should pursue a career in cutting and sewing like her mother, Caroline, then only 10, replied that she wanted to be a lawyer to defend women like her mom, who had to fight against everything and everyone to survive. Haley, Catherine's daughter, graduated with a business degree in 1986 and brought a new perspective to our business. With her knowledge, we implemented a more efficient financial control system, expanded into new product lines, and even opened a small branch in a neighboring town. Haley and Christian worked together on the company's growth strategies, combining engineering and administration to optimize our processes. It was fascinating to see how the half-siblings, who only met in their teens, developed such a close and collaborative relationship. Haley and Christian had the same analytical gaze, the same quiet determination. Scarlett and Haley shared a keen aesthetic sense, though expressed in different ways, one in fashion, the other in the impeccable organization of spreadsheets and reports. I can't say everything was perfect. There were difficult times, heated arguments, contested decisions, like in any family. And yes, we had become an unconventional family, united by bonds stronger than blood. There was the economic recession of the early 82nds, the various economic plans that turned our planning upside down, the rampant inflation that made it almost impossible to price our products. In 1986, during a period of severe economic instability, we almost lost everything. Price freezes, combined with a scarcity of raw materials, put us in an impossible position. I remember sleepless nights, sitting at the kitchen table with Catherine and Haley, trying to find a way out of the economic maze the country had fallen into. It was Christian who suggested we diversify into alteration and adjustment services, which could be priced by the hour of labor and not just by the value of the final product. Logan found a cooperative of cotton producers in the rural South who were willing to negotiate on terms that allowed us to survive in the frozen market, and Scarlett created a line of accessories made from scraps that would have been discarded, turning potential waste into a new source of income. Once again, adversity strengthened us instead of defeating us. We emerged from that recession stronger, more diversified, and more united as a family and as a company. In 1990, when the savings and loan crisis hit, we faced another crisis. We had saved for years to buy a larger property for the store, and suddenly a large part of that money was inaccessible. It was months of tightening our belts, of reorganizing, of even more intense work. It was around this time that Catherine began to show the first signs of fatigue. A few years older than me, she was already in her 52nd, and the stress of the previous years had taken its toll. It started with small things: frequent headaches, lack of appetite, a weariness that rest couldn't cure. In early 1991, the devastating diagnosis came: breast cancer. Already in an advanced stage, Catherine had ignored the signs, too busy taking care of the business, too busy ensuring Haley's future. The months that followed were a roller coaster of emotions: surgery, chemotherapy, radiation, good days followed by terrible days. Haley, destroyed by the possibility of losing her mother, found the strength to continue managing the store while I accompanied Catherine to her treatments. It was strange how life came full circle. There I was, caring for the woman I once considered my rival, the other woman in my husband's life, holding her hand during chemotherapy sessions, helping her eat on days she was too weak to lift a spoon, reading to her when her eyes were too tired to focus on the words. On one of those afternoons at the hospital, while we were waiting for the doctor, Catherine held my hand and said, something I will never forget. "You know, Margaret, when you showed up at that shop in Savannah, I thought it was the worst day of my life. But today, I see it was the best. That day freed me from a life of lies and brought me you, the best friend I've ever had." And with those words, their incredible journey comes full circle. The woman who was once the symbol of betrayal became Margaret's greatest ally and truest friend. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes our greatest blessings are born from our deepest wounds. Though this chapter closes, the legacy these two women built together is only just beginning. I couldn't respond, emotion closing my throat. I just squeezed her hand, and I knew she understood everything I couldn't say. Catherine fought bravely for 4 years. She had periods of remission when she would return to work part-time at the store, always with a colorful scarf covering her hairless head. She had relapses that sent her back to the hospital for weeks. In early 1995, shortly after Haley had celebrated her 30th birthday, Catherine left us peacefully in her bed, holding my hand on one side and her daughter's on the other. The grief was profound, not just for Haley, but for all of us. Catherine had become the heart of our strange, blended family. Her absence left a void that seemed impossible to fill. The store, though it continued to run under the competent management of Haley and my children, felt less alive without her presence. It was during this period of mourning that I made a decision that surprised everyone. Using my savings and a loan that Christian helped me secure, I bought a larger house with enough space for all of us, me, my 4 children, and Haley, if she wanted to join us. I remember the look on her face when I made the offer. A mix of surprise, emotion, and a touch of hesitation. "Are you sure, Margaret? Wouldn't it be strange for your children?" "My children have considered you family for years, Haley. And so do I. Your mother was like a sister to me, and you're like a daughter. Our family has never been conventional anyway." She accepted. And so we began a new chapter. The new house, though not luxurious, was spacious and welcoming. Everyone had their own room, and there was still space for a sewing room where I continued to create, even though I spent less time at the store. Christian got married in 1996 to Felicity, a co-worker from the engineering firm where he worked. The following year, my first grandson, Jet, was born. Holding him in my arms for the first time was an indescribable experience. Looking at that perfect little face, I thought about the whole journey that brought me there. The birthday card in Walter's pocket, the discovery in Savannah, the years of struggle to rebuild my life, the unlikely friendship with Catherine, the growth of the store, the crises overcome every difficulty, every tear, every night of work to the point of exhaustion. Everything had been worth it to reach that moment, to see my family growing, prosperous, united, in a way I never imagined possible. Scarlett graduated in fashion design in 1998 and took over the creative direction of the store completely. Her talent elevated our creations to a new level, attracting a more diverse clientele and expanding our reputation beyond the neighborhood. Logan married young at 23 to his high school sweetheart and had 2 children in quick succession. Despite the early family responsibilities, he never stopped contributing to the business, becoming our commercial director and the main person responsible for negotiations with suppliers and corporate clients. Caroline, my youngest, completed law school in 2003, and although she opened her own practice, always dedicated part of her time to handling the legal aspects of our company, ensuring everything complied with labor and tax laws. And Haley, who initially thought of building her career in a large corporation, decided to stay in the family business, taking on the role her mother had left and expanding it. Under her efficient management, we opened 2 more branches by the end of the 90 seconds, transforming the small apparel shop, born from adversity, into a respected local chain. As the new millennium approached, I looked back and could hardly believe the transformation of my life. From the naive young woman who blindly trusted her husband, to the respected businesswoman who had raised 4 children with dignity, from the betrayed and abandoned woman to the matriarch of an unconventional but extremely united family. The scars were still there, of course. There were moments when the memory of the betrayal still hurt, when the absence of Catherine still weighed heavily, when the fatigue of years of struggle threatened to overwhelm me. But those scars had become marks of a battle won, silent witnesses to my ability to overcome, to reinvent myself, to turn pain into strength. As my mother used to say, God works in mysterious ways. What seemed to be the end of my world, that Saturday in Savannah, turned out to be the beginning of a life more authentic, more fulfilling, and, surprisingly, happier than I ever imagined possible. The new millennium arrived, bringing transformations to the world and profound reflections for me. At 76 years old, looking back, I see a life I could never have imagined when I was that scared young woman in 1978, discovering my husband's betrayal. The year 2000 was special for our family. We celebrated the 20th anniversary of New Beginnings Apparel with a celebration that brought together old and new employees, loyal customers, suppliers who had become friends, and, of course, our unconventional family. I remember being on the small, improvised stage, looking out at that hall full of smiling faces and feeling a wave of gratitude so intense I could barely speak. Haley was by my side, holding my hand as if she sensed my emotion the daughter life gave me, not by blood, but by a destiny that turned tragedy into a blessing. At that moment, I felt Catherine's presence, as if she were there, smiling with that warm smile she maintained even on the most difficult days of her illness. We started as 2 broken women, I finally managed to say, with children to raise and broken hearts. We didn't have much besides our hands, our determination, and a skill with a needle and thread. Look at us now. Tears streamed freely down my face, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of acknowledgement for the path traveled, for the lives transformed, for the legacy we were building. The business continued to prosper in the following years. In 2002, we expanded into the corporate uniform sector, a more stable market that protected us from economic fluctuations. In 2005, under Scarlett's leadership, we launched our first collection of affordable formal wear, which became a huge success among women who wanted elegance without spending a fortune. But more than commercial success, what filled me with pride was seeing how each of my children, including Haley in this count, had become an upstanding, compassionate, and determined adult. Christian, my firstborn, became a respected engineer, working on projects that improved the lives of underprivileged communities. In 2003, he led an initiative to bring solar power to a low-income housing development on the outskirts of the city. When asked where his passion for social projects came from, he would reply, "I learned from my mother that difficulties can be springboards, not obstacles." Scarlett transformed her talent for fashion into a platform to empower other women. In addition to her role in the company, in 2006, she created a project that taught sewing to vulnerable women, many of them victims of domestic violence. "My mother rebuilt her life with a needle and thread," she would tell her students. "You can too." Logan, always the most communicative, became the public face of our business. He was the one who negotiated our first major international partnership in 2008 with a European brand looking for ethical production in the United States. His natural charisma opened doors, but it was his integrity that kept those doors open. "I learned from my mother that your word is your most valuable asset," he used to say. Caroline, my youngest, born in the midst of the storm, became a lawyer dedicated to women's causes. In 2004, she opened an office specializing in family law, helping women in situations similar to the one I faced decades earlier. I grew up watching my mother fight against a system that wasn't prepared for a divorced woman with 4 children, she explained. I want to ensure that other women have the legal support she didn't have. And Haley, who grew up with the weight of being the secret daughter, transformed into a visionary businesswoman and a dedicated philanthropist. In 2007, she established a foundation in her mother's name, Catherine, which offered scholarships to children of single mothers. My mother and Margaret taught me that family isn't defined by blood or by paperwork, she would say at the scholarship award ceremonies. It's defined by love, by care, by being present in difficult times. The grandchildren started to arrive, filling my house and my heart. By 2010, there were 8 of them, 4 from Christian, 2 from Logan, 1 from Scarlett, and 1 from Caroline. Watching them grow, playing together on family Sundays, without any idea of the extraordinary circumstances that united their families, was one of my greatest joys. In 2012, at the age of 63, I decided to reduce my active participation in the company. My children and Haley were already running it competently, and I felt the need for more time for myself, to take care of my health, which was beginning to show signs of wear, and to enjoy my grandchildren. It wasn't a complete retirement. I still went to the store a few times a week, still created special pieces for old clients, still participated in important decisions, but now I had time for the small joys, teaching my grandchildren to sew, cultivating a small herb garden on the porch, joining a book club at the local library. It was in this quieter phase that I began to reflect deeply on my journey and the legacy I would leave. Not just the material legacy, the company, the house, the savings that ensured comfort for my children and grandchildren, but the legacy of values, of lessons learned, of wisdom gained through pain and overcoming. In 2015, I was invited to give a speech at an event for women entrepreneurs. I was nervous. I've never been one for public speaking. I always preferred the quiet work of my hands, creating with fabric, but Caroline insisted, saying my story could inspire other women. I'm no speaker, I argued. I don't even have the education to speak to a bunch of educated people. Mom, Caroline replied with that determination she inherited from me. You have something more valuable than any diploma. Lived experience. Your story is powerful. I ended up accepting, and to my surprise, that speech opened a new phase in my life. Other women, many much younger than me, wanted to hear about how I turned betrayal into strength, how I built a business from scratch, how I raised 4 children alone at a time when being a single mother was almost a scandal. The secret, I told them, is not to avoid falling, but to get up. Every time life knocks you down, and, if possible, bring someone who is also down up with you. In 2018, at 69, I experienced another milestone, the merger of our company with a national fashion brand. It wasn't a sale, but a partnership that allowed New Beginnings Apparel to expand to other cities while maintaining its values and essence. The condition we imposed was that the policy of hiring vulnerable women, initiated by Scarlett, be maintained and expanded. The signing of this contract, with all my children and Haley by my side, represented the closing of a cycle. From the small living room transformed into a makeshift workshop in our house to a company that would now have a national presence. The journey had been long and extraordinary. In 2020, when the pandemic struck the world, we faced new challenges. With the stores closed and uniform orders drastically reduced, we had to reinvent ourselves once again. It was Logan who suggested the transition to online commerce, something we had resisted for years, preferring personal contact with customers. The pandemic also brought us back to our roots. We started producing masks, initially for donation to hospitals and needy communities, then as a new product line. The whole family got involved. Even I, already 71, went back to sewing daily, remembering the early days when every piece I produced was crucial to putting food on the table. Now, in 2025, I look back and see a life that, despite all the pain, was rich in meaning and purpose. I never remarried. There were a few relationships over the years, good men who brought moments of companionship and affection, but I never felt the need to make anything official. My family, my children, Haley, my grandchildren, and the ever-present memory of Catherine filled my heart in a way no romance could. Walter remains a distant, almost mythical figure in our family's history. When the grandchildren grew up and started asking questions about the grandfather they never knew, we told them the truth in a way that was appropriate for their age. Not to perpetuate resentment, but to honor the journey that brought us here. Your grandfather made mistakes that hurt many people, I would explain. But without those mistakes, our family wouldn't be what it is today. You wouldn't have so many aunts, uncles, and cousins. I wouldn't have found the strength I never knew I had. It's strange to think that I owe a debt of gratitude to the man who broke my heart. Not for the abandonment, of course, nor for the lies, but for the catalyst his actions became in my life. Without that birthday card found in his jacket pocket, without that desperate trip to Savannah, without that painful confrontation, I might have lived my entire life in the shadows, accepting less than I deserved, never discovering what I was truly capable of. At 76, sitting on the porch of the house I built with my own work, surrounded by photos of children and grandchildren, with the memory of Catherine always present in small details, I feel a peace that seemed impossible on that day in 1978. The wrinkles on my face tell the story of many smiles, many tears, many sleepless nights, many celebrations. My hands, now a bit shaky with age but still skilled enough to teach my 5-year-old great-granddaughter her first stitches, carry the memory of every piece sewn, every fabric cut, every button attached. It was these hands that fed my children, that dried their tears, that built a business, that offered support to other broken women. If I could go back in time and speak to that young, scared, and betrayed Margaret, I would say, the path will be difficult. There will be days when you'll want to give up, but you are stronger than you imagine. This pain, which now seems unbearable, will be transformed into something beautiful. And one day, many years from now, you will look back and understand that that terrible moment was, in fact, the beginning of your true life. The path to forgiveness was not a straight one. For years, the memory of Walter's betrayal was a thorn lodged deep in my heart, and on some days, the ache would return with a sharp sting. But time, the love of my family, and the unlikely friendship I found with Catherine taught me that holding on to anger only wounds the person carrying it. Forgiving Walter wasn't about excusing what he did, it was about unshackling myself from the past. It was an acceptance that the pain had shaped me, but it no longer had power over me. If my story touched your heart, I hope you'll subscribe to the channel to join me for more life journeys.